Welcome to Detours, Understanding Acquired Brain Injury. I want to introduce to you our new host, Debbie, and she has an interesting story to share with you. She has some unusual autonomic reactions as a result of her traumatic brain injury. These, but her profile symptoms are different. Many of you are familiar with neurostorm. She has a constellation of reactions which are kind of in opposition to it based on which areas were injured and what happened to her. She suffered severe traumatic brain injury, and I'll let her introduce herself and share her story. Hi, Debbie.
Hi, I'm Debbie. I was a truck driver and I was dollying down my trailer, I guess. I don't remember. And they tell me that my dolly handle recoiled and hit me in the front left forehead and threw me backwards about 15 feet, where the back of my head hit the trailer behind me, and knocked me out. And so the right side of my head and my shoulder hit the pavement. And about 45 minutes later, I guess I came to, and I was crawling across the parking lot towards my truck. I don't remember any of it. I don't remember actually the past 5.5 years. I don't recognize faces. I don't recognize my own face. I don't recognize my kid's face. I can't write. They put a pacemaker in because I have something called autonomic dysfunction, and my brain likes to tell my heart, hey, heart, it's time to chill out and rest. And so it will make my heart go down to the 20s, the teens. But it will also tell my digestive system it's time to move, and it will purge everything in my body. So it's what I have is called autonomic dysfunction. And at first they thought that it just affected my PNS, my the part of my body that says chill out, stupid, danger's over. But it affects both my autonomic, yep, I lost the words. You want to help me out here?
Sure. Those of you who watched my video from about a month ago, remember when I talked about with traumatic brain injury, and I'll link that below, where I talked about primary effects, where I said the autonomic nervous system is divided into sympathetic and parasympathetic functions. The parasympathetic are for, well, the sympathetic is fight or flight, and the parasympathetic is rest and digest. That division in the ANS. Most people who do neurostorming have a malfunction where it comes to the fight or flight. With Debbie, what's unusual is on the rest and digest side, which is the reverse, when it passes through, we talked about the trigeminal nerve signaling off the cranial nerves. It's divided, and there are surgical procedures, neurosurgical procedures, where they can divide that to prevent missignaling. But she's having signaling problems on both sides, and so one of the ways to address this malfunction is to use a pacemaker system to signal for both sides. But this requires some very advanced neurosurgical interventions, complex, and it requires, in many cases, like disconnection. However, there are a number of inputs off the brain and off the brainstem and through the trigeminal nerve connections that require a lot of, to the point of it being virtually not impossible, but very complex, many hours long microneurosurgical interventions and disconnecting from certain places throughout the body to the point of it being where certain drugs, alpha blockers, alpha stimulators, and playing my chemistry set, my home chemistry set is probably easier rather than doing a lot of these surgical interventions. So this is why Debbie has the problem she does, because of the complexity of both sympathetic, parasympathetic excess stimulation. That would be a whole other video. And yes, I do plan on making one at some point to talk about this, but this stuff is difficult.
It changed my whole personality.
Frontal lobe injury.
Before I got hurt, I the worst word I would say is winker. I would be on the CV and say, "Hey, you winker, you cut me off." And now I say all sorts of fun words. I'm mean. I'm mean. My temper goes from 0 to 100 in like a split second. I have no patience. I can't write at all. I don't recognize any faces. I don't recognize mine. I don't recognize my kids. I don't recognize anybody's face. I get lost. I used to drive all over the country, all over Canada, and I get lost in a paper bag.
These are different, and talking to the viewers, like different sets of symptoms. Virtually everyone with frontal lobe injury, and even those without, remember our discussions about network connections. As far as like the irritability, temper, that is very, 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 very common. Virtually everyone with frontal lobe injury of any sort, irritability, anger issues. I even talk about that in a 4-part episode where we talk about that is highly common after traumatic brain injury. Beta blockers are a good way to manage that as far as medication or ADD, ADHD medications, because it isn't just usually frontal lobe injury or any kind of brain injury. It's also PTSD, the stressors, and the difficulty of not being able to do the things we were able to do. It's also then changes in family support. And again, another highly complex issue. As far as your visual spatial stuff, that's from damage back here towards the back of the head, and recognizing people's faces. Again, that's more processing towards the back, where we recognize faces and recognize spatial relationships, visual spatial, and the reading, the writing, all those kind of skills. Again, recognition, that's all processed back here and right in the areas where when you landed on the back of your head, symbolic recognition here, and visual spatial relationships, that stuff's all towards the back, in the parietal lobes. And prosopagnosia, which is lack of recognition of faces, including your own quite often. But the irritability, the anger, and that stuff is like, I haven't met a survivor yet who doesn't have some problems with that. Not one who doesn't deal with the anger, the irritability. Everyone that I know has some of that. Me for sure. And no patience, guilty. And the anger and the irritability, guilty. Anyone who's watched my videos knows. My wife's always like, "You're so impatient." It's like, you should have met me 30 years ago, right after I was hurt. And the anger and stuff. So yeah. And it's not to make light of it or not to say, it's like that you're not particularly struggling, but I am saying you've got a big family of people who know what it feels like. 1 in 20 people out there have permanent neurological impairment due to acquired brain injury. And I would argue that we always say loneliness after 5 or 6 years after our injury is the number one complaint, because so many of us have these other problems, these personality changes. And those are some of the leading symptoms.
I like being alone.
A lot of us do tend to retreat because we feel so alone. and we don't have to then deal with the normies.
I have my dog. He doesn't expect anything of me. Sounds funny, but it's true.
Well, it's easy not to push ourselves. Problem is then we don't grow. If we don't grow, anything that doesn't grow dies. That's a lesson that took me a while to learn, though. I get it. For first like 12 years. Yeah. Again, that's a mark you would not have liked to have known. I really don't think. I just think about those days and it's like, anyway.
I don't think that this is a Debbie that anybody would like to know.
I disagree with that. I like you, and I definitely see quite a bit of many a survivor in you, many of us in you. I definitely see quite a bit of me and like so many of my other friends too. But I also see a lot of pain, you know. So what are your biggest things today that cause you, the most challenges?
Not being able to recognize people, not being able to write. I used to run 10 miles a day. I used to run 5Ks. I used to drive a truck. Not being able to take care of myself.
Mhm.
People taking advantage of me. People use the fuck out of you when they realize that you're brain damaged. I've realized that, and it pisses me off. And I did not realize that. I did not realize that people were such wankers.
And that is an important thing to address. So survivors out there. I mean, again, something I mentioned in one of my videos is that beware. I mean, like with the scams, the bullshit cures, people who'll try to push, and it's like they'll say, "Oh, this fixes what's wrong with you. This fixes your brain injury. You'll be back to just like you were. Try
Oh,
this
it's not even
magic."
just that. It's
No,
that,
no. I know.
oh, I love you so much. Here, let me take care of you. And then the next thing you know, all your money's gone.
Family. Uh-huh. Yeah. Yeah, that is a whole other.
Excuse me, am I allowed to smoke?
It's your house.
Thank you.
Yep. I just, yeah, no, that's a whole other thing. Lisa talked a lot about that, who is one of our hosts who she suffered another brain injury. And I'm not even gonna get, but she talked about that very problem. She resigned because it was overwhelming, and then with another injury, and she became overwhelmed. We still have her videos up if you're interested. She talks about that very issue. We also tend to be victims of domestic violence, and astonishing rate.
You are the
And
I am the only one who loves you.
yeah,
I'm the only one who could put up with you.
yeah.
Yes. I've heard that.
Hmm. Yep. And you start to believe it after a while.
I love my dog and I love my kids. The kids in my house. They want nothing from me. And they've been here through the whole thing. Nothing will make a 9-year-old grow up faster than having to raise a mother with a brain damage.
I know, I'm not gonna say anything more about it, but I know you've had issues with family. So I'm not gonna push. And so all I'm gonna say is it's like they either are the best, the allies, the harbor, or are that weight that drags you to the bottom of the sea,
Yes.
and or both. And
I've learned to be very, very careful about who I trust.
there's a wise bit of advice right there. If we get nothing else out of this videos and drill here, be very wary, because they may seem like they're an ally, friend, family member worthy of your trust. They have to earn it. Even if they're blood relatives. And for those of you family out there, it's not that we want these problems. It's we didn't choose for these kind of things to happen. So please, ask while we're still in the hospital, or whatever. Ask the doctors what to expect. Ask the psychologists what to expect. Ask if they can explain things. This is the purpose of these videos.
Heck,
So you know.
actually show up in the hospital. Don't show up 2 years later.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, and that is a valid kind of, you know, and that's a red flag to those of you survivors out there. Somebody suddenly shows up from family or someone who, and they show up 2 years later. Don't. They're not. What I'm saying here is like, you need to be cautious and wary about those folks in your life. Not everyone is as they appear. I'm not making any statements about Debbie's particular situation, but I know from my own and from all of those who've joined us, that it's very important, those people we let into our lives, because, well, it applies to everybody, of course, but we tend to be a little more vulnerable and we're hurt more easily, and we don't have the defenses necessarily. That takes time to develop those.
Part of it is that you get hurt and so many people disappear.
Yeah.
And so and it's not just that they disappear, you push them away too.
Yes.
I mean, I know I've pushed a bunch of people away.
Yeah.
But so when somebody shows up and they say, "Oh, I love you and I want to take care of you," and you want to believe them.
Right.
But I mean, I want to point something out. I got hurt doing my job.
Right.
Doing my job. Doing a job that millions of truck drivers do every single day. 2.7% of truck drivers get hurt every single day, every single year, doing the same thing in some way, shape, or form. It might not be a head injury, it might be a shoulder injury, it might be a hand injury, whatever. But 2.7% of truck drivers get hurt by this same piece of equipment. That rounds out to about 87,500 truck drivers a year get hurt by this same piece of equipment. That means since I got hurt, 350,000 truck drivers have gotten hurt by this piece of equipment. And I'm not saying they all got brain injuries.
No.
They might have gotten a shoulder, a rotator cuff tear. They might have gotten a back injury. They might have gotten something 350,000 truck drivers.
That
Now,
is
350,000 lawyers got a paper cut in 4 years. Do you think that they would have found a better way to handle a piece of paper?
well, here's the thing though, and I bring this up every day in the United States, every day, 5 people in every state, every day, 5 people suffer severe traumatic brain injury in motor vehicle accidents. 5 people in every state, every day, severe traumatic brain injury in motor vehicle accidents. And it doesn't matter your walk of life, doctor, nurse, lawyer, whatever, politician, whatever, it doesn't care. Every day. In some states, that's more. Severe traumatic brain injury. That's not including the people who have moderate or mild and still suffer permanent neurological impairment. This is why they're 1 out of 20 who we walk by every day who suffer permanent acquired brain injury. Think about that.
So what
every
I'm just
20
saying
people passed.
is if 87,500 lawyers a year got a paper cut, do you think that they would put a warning label on
Nah,
that piece of paper saying
because
warning?
because they don't do anything for the people with who get into car accidents and suffer 5 for every state. So over 270 some odd every day in America who suffer severe traumatic brain injury in car accidents. It's getting worse, actually, not better, worse. Because people are driving faster and pushing their vehicles beyond what's safe. The people are getting dumber when it comes to handling their vehicles. I don't know what the answer is.
I know the answer is to my question. The answer to my question would be a simple piece of paper, a simple warning that says, warning, may cause injury.
Do you
A
think
woman,
would
an
be?
old woman in the 90s put a hot cup of coffee between her legs
Yeah,
and
that
burned
might
herself.
that might shield the company from liability, but what about protecting the drivers? How about in better technology?
And that she burned herself with that hot cup of coffee.
Yeah.
And that one old woman changed the label on every to-go cup in America for the rest of to-go cups.
Yeah.
We now all know that the hot coffee in that hot coffee cup is hot.
But
And we better be careful. And it's on us if we burn ourselves.
it's the thing is, wouldn't better technology rather than risking the head of the truck drivers and their shoulders and their arms,
Oh
wouldn't
yeah,
better
a pneumatic
technology?
or a hydraulic piece of equipment there would stop all injuries.
So are you saying you would not have been hurt if there had been a warning label on there warning you it was dangerous? That's the
I'm saying
implication.
that I probably, if there had been a warning label, I would have known it was dangerous. And if there had been a hydraulic or a pneumatic piece of equipment instead of a manual piece of equipment, I definitely would not have been injured. And most definitely, if the equipment had been better taken care of, I would not have been injured.
So that's kind of significant. Is there any advice you would have? Just thinking about, like, for because you have been a survivor for a while now. Is there like anything you would recognize or recommend? I apologize. Recommend to young people who are just or to survivors who've been injured. Tips to help. them cope in these early days for them, like within the first few weeks, months, initial year or two.
I don't have any advice because I'm still learning myself. I'm bordering on wanting to move to Canada and trying to find my way back. So I'm the wrong person to ask for advice.
I don't know. That in and of itself is something. There's always that kind of search, and admitting that you still are learning and growing with it too. Um, a lot of people, I mean, and I would argue that, I'm still learning too. I learn a lot from everybody I talk to, everybody who's in my, in in Friends of Brain Injury, in detours and all the different components of the group is still trying to figure out, look for answers, look for ways to grow and learn acceptance, which is really hard. I I wrestle with that one every day.
I'm
Some
still in
days.
my mad phase,
Mhm.
my very, very mad phase.
You move
I
in
could
and
give you a
out.
list of people I would rather this have happened to.
Mhm.
So when I get out of this phase, you can ask me this question again.
Okay. And that's the thing too. A lot of people expect you to move from one to the other to the. You don't do that. You move back and forth. You move. Um, it's not like grief is a linear process. I have a video where I talk about loss and grief. It's because we don't have rituals to say goodbye to the old you, who still honestly is really there. It's just that some old traits that you had before may have been magnified, or ones that you liked about yourself were diminished. And it's a complicated kind of thing. And then we have to learn to say, we learn to have to, before others can accept us as we are, we have to accept ourselves as we are. We can't expect others to do something we cannot do ourselves.
And I think that's my problem is I don't accept myself. I write a lot. A lot.
One of the best ways to do is, this is something that I have our group do when we meet with the board of directors and stuff like that, is I have us a positive, I use positive psychology. So something, a situation you're grateful for, and a person in your life that you're grateful for, or, like it could be a pet, or like, but, and it can't, it cannot be self-reflective, because you have to change the mindset. And that applies to all of us. And if you put yourself down, you've got to make two positive statements about yourself, because we're often toughest on ourselves. So every negative self statement, two positive self statements.
Remind me what day your group is so I can be sick that day.
But that's anytime we meet. That
Oh,
is
okay.
anytime we meet. That's the board of directors. And that is like the executive board, because the only way to change and to grow, again, growth can only be accomplished through making change. It's as simple as that. You're either growing or you're dying. If you look at your plants outside, they're only in two phases. They're growing or they're dying.
Mine are dying. I have a black thumb.
Honestly, I have a
Honestly,
brown thumb too, so which is why I trust a gardener. And that analogy is a good one. Um, if we are dying emotionally, socially, psychologically, we need to trust ourselves. We need to find a good gardener. Sometimes that's the hardest thing, which ties right back to what you were talking about. Also, a weird sense of humor is common amongst people with brain injury too, which I could tell you have.
I had one of those a long time
Long
ago.
time, right? Yeah, no, a black sense of humor is very common. Yeah, but I could appreciate that because I'm guilty of that. Of course, I've always had one. So smart people tend to have that. That is the other thing which I mentioned. Highly intelligent TBI survivors, the group, all of us. It's like you find that, and people who are intelligent with brain injury struggle a lot with it because they still know what they are and what they are missing. So I would say that is also another challenge. Whew. This was a heavy duty one, wasn't it? Intro. But you know what? I will say thank you and welcome aboard. After this, you set the tone for like now that we've gotten past the intro, you set the tone for whatever you'd like to talk about, whatever you think is important to talk about. It's like your little corner of detours. And I'd like to say welcome aboard. And so as we explore, as we talk, you schedule whenever you'd like. And so please like, comment, subscribe. Don't forget to hit that bell icon, and we will see you again. Bye.
Bye.